What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Whyloric. So today's topic might sting a little. We're talking about why being talented doesn't actually guarantee success. Let's jump in.
You know, if you look around your office right now or even just casually scroll through your LinkedIn feed on your phone, you are inevitably going to collide with a really uncomfortable professional paradox.
Oh, yeah. It's everywhere once you actually start looking for it.
Right. I mean, we all know someone, like a former classmate, a colleague, a friend, who is genuinely, just undeniably gifted.
The natural.
Exactly, the natural. The kind of person who just coasted through university, aced every complex project, and was so clearly, the smartest person in any room they walked into.
Yeah.
And yet, if you look at where they are, say 10 years down the line, they're stuck.
Completely stagnant.
Completely. And the flip side of that is just as jarring, right? Because we all know people who were, let's be honest, perfectly average.
Solid B- students.
Yeah, the ones who really had to claw their way to that B-. But now they're running the entire department, they're launching massive companies, and they're just absolutely crushing it.
It really does break our internal model of how the world is supposed to work, doesn't it?
It totally breaks it because, why isn't the smartest person winning?
Well, it shatters that model because we spend our entire childhoods being conditioned to believe that talent is the finished product.
Right.
We treat natural ability like it's the destination itself. But I was reading through the source material for our deep dive today, which is this fascinating paper on exactly why talent isn't enough. And it argues that our entire definition of potential is completely backwards.
Okay, backwards how?
So the text uses this brilliant framework.
Okay.
It suggests that innate talent is really nothing more than a vein of iron ore, just buried in the ground.
Just raw ore.
Exactly, raw iron ore. It has potential value, yes, but just sitting there in the dirt, it is entirely useless. You can't build a bridge with raw iron ore.
Yeah, of course not.
You can't forge a tool out of it. The raw material is literally just the starting point. And what you actually do with that material requires a completely separate and honestly grueling set of mechanisms.
You have to process it.
Right. You have to mine it, melt it down, subject it to intense heat, forge it, and actually hammer it into something structurally sound.
Okay, I hear what you're saying about the raw material and the forging process. And let me just play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
If you look at industries that really pride themselves on pure output, right? Like software engineering or high-level design or even writing, there is this deep-seated belief that the brilliant coders or the virtuosic writers genuinely do just rise to the top on their own steam.
Sure, that's the myth we love to tell.
Right. So doesn't that feel almost cynical to tell someone who has spent their whole life honing a specific craft that their sheer superiority isn't enough? Shouldn't the universe, or at least the free market, just automatically reward the best merit?
We desperately want the universe to reward pure merit, because it feels fair. The idea of a pure meritocracy is a very safe, very comforting worldview. But the reality, relying entirely on your raw material without developing the specific behavioral machinery to actually process it, is pretty much the most common recipe for professional failure.
Wow. Okay, so what is that machinery then?
Well, the research we're looking at makes a really critical distinction here. Talent is fantastic at generating initial attention.
It gets you noticed.
Exactly. It gets you the early applause. But the mechanisms that actually sustain a career over decades, things like long-term consistency, the psychological resilience to endure harsh feedback, and the strategic ability to make yourself visible, those are entirely different muscles.
So the talent just gets you to the starting line.
Yes. If you only rely on the fact that you're naturally gifted, you are essentially trying to build a 50-story skyscraper using only wet clay.
Oh, wow. That's a great image.
Right. Like the architectural rendering might look beautiful and the ground floor might go up effortlessly. But the moment you try to build upward, the entire structure just collapses under its own unrefined weight.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because that collapse, it usually happens at a very specific juncture in someone's career, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
It happens the exact moment the work required to refine that raw clay stops being inherently fun.
Yes, exactly.
Like, if we trace the life cycle of a naturally gifted person, the first major structural failure almost always occurs when they hit what this text so perfectly calls and I love this phrase, the boring middle part.
The boring middle part. It's where the illusion of early ease completely backfires on you.
Tell me about that. Why does it backfire?
We have to look at the psychology of the gifted kid or the natural prodigy. From a very young age, their brains are wired to experience a massive, just disproportionate return on investment.
Because things come easy to them.
Exactly. Because they have an intuitive grasp of a subject, whether it's math or music or, corporate strategy. They can put in like 10% of the effort of their peers and they get 100% of the validation.
Their brains are basically getting flooded with dopamine without ever having to encounter real friction.
Bingo. They learn to deeply associate success with effortlessness. The dopamine hit of praise becomes inextricably linked to a total lack of sweat.
Okay, and that neurological linkage, that becomes a massive liability the moment they enter a complex professional environment.
Well, a huge liability.
Yeah.
Because eventually, the easy gains just dry up. The initial rush of demonstrating a new, flashy skill, it fades away. And they cross this threshold into a phase where improvement, or honestly, even just basic competence, requires relentless, repetitive, unglamorous effort.
The grind.
The grind.
Yeah.
And the brain of the highly talented person, which has never been trained to endure friction, essentially throws a tantrum.
A tantrum? Like, how does that look?
Well, because their early success was so frictionless, they falsely equate hard work or boredom with failure. They start thinking, if this is hard, I must not be good at it anymore.
Oh, wow.
Or if this is tedious, it must mean I'm on the wrong career path.
Let's ground this in reality for a second, because I think everyone listening has either been this person, managed this person, or just watched this person totally self-destruct in real time.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's imagine a junior data analyst. They're incredibly sharp, top of their class, and they've just landed a highly coveted role at a major firm.
Okay, classic setup.
Right. So it's week 1. The managing director hands them a horrifically messy legacy data set that has been just a huge thorn in the department side for months.
A chance to show off.
Exactly, because our junior analyst has this brilliant, intuitive grasp of data structures. They just sit down, put their headphones on, and write a highly elegant, completely novel script in Python. They clean the entire data set in 2 hours.
2 hours? Wow.
And they present it at the afternoon stand-up meeting, and the reaction is explosive. The managing director is floored. The senior partners are sending them Slack messages with rocket ship emojis. They are instantly branded a rock star.
The validation is intoxicating at that point. I mean, their brain is literally telling them, this is the baseline. Every day of my career will be a series of brilliant intellectual conquests followed by immediate adoration.
But the reality of business is that the applause stops.
It always stops.
Fast forward to month 3. That brilliant script they wrote in week 1, it is now deeply embedded as a standard operating procedure.
It's just part of the furniture now.
Exactly. Their job description now dictates that they must run that exact script, check the dense output files for minor, mind-numbing formatting errors, and manually copy-paste the results into a massive, slow-loading spreadsheet for the finance department.
Oh, the horror.
Every single day. There are no more rocket ship emojis. There's no applause. There is just the hum of the office HVAC system, the blinking cursor, and the daily, relentless execution of the exact same task.
Which requires zero brilliant innovation.
Zero. But it requires massive, consistent effort.
Yes.
So based on the text, what happens to our rockstar analyst?
According to the behavioral patterns outlined in our source material, they begin a rapid, highly predictable descent into underperformance.
Like, they just stop trying.
Well, first it manifests as carelessness. They start making minor, sloppy errors on that finance spreadsheet because they just aren't fully engaged.
Right, because it's boring.
And when they are asked to correct those errors, they actually feel insulted. Then the behavioral drift starts. They show up 5 minutes late to the morning stand-up. They take slightly longer lunches.
They start checking out.
Totally checking out.
Yeah.
Eventually, they start venting to their peers using very specific language. They'll say things like, I'm just so bored here, or leadership really isn't utilizing my true potential.
Oh man, I've heard that exact phrase so many times. They aren't utilizing my potential.
Right. It's a defense mechanism.
So they rationalize their failure to execute by blaming the environment for not being stimulating enough, rather than recognizing their own lack of discipline.
Exactly. They were entirely prepared for the thrill of the rocket launch, but they had absolutely no life support systems built for the reality of staying in orbit.
Staying in orbit, that is such a good analogy.
Orbit is a perfect way to describe it, right? Orbit is just sustained, controlled falling. It's a grind. And this is where the text delivers one of its most piercing insights. It states, point blank, Most success stories are just very good stories about surviving the boring middle part.
Surviving the boring middle part. That sounds like a chapter title in a self-help book.
It really does. But it's so true because we exist in a professional culture that aggressively fetishizes the beginning and the end.
Oh, 100%.
We make movies about the brilliant startup idea scribbled on a napkin in a dorm room.
Yeah.
And we celebrate the IPO on Wall Street with the ringing of the bell and the confetti.
But we ignore the middle.
We completely, systematically erase the thousands of hours of absolute soul-crushing boredom that connects those 2 points. Actual durable mastery isn't glamorous. It is doing the fundamental drills long after the novelty has evaporated.
So, if someone is listening to this right now, and maybe they're feeling that knot in their stomach because they realize they are currently trapped in the boring middle part, and their brain is just screaming for novelty and a new dopamine hit, how do they rewire that?
That's the million-dollar question.
Like, how do you build the consistent habits required for long-term success when you've always relied on that initial burst of talent?
It requires a brutal paradigm shift. You have to intellectually accept that your talent was only the entry fee.
Entry fee.
It bought you a seat at the table, nothing more. To build those consistent habits, you have to actively decouple your sense of professional self-worth from immediate praise. You have to train your brain to find deep, quiet satisfaction, not in the applause, but in the precision of the execution itself.
So when you hit that wall of boredom when running that script and updating that spreadsheet feels physically painful, you have to consciously reframe the narrative.
Yes, you have to tell yourself, this boredom is not a signal that I am on the wrong path. This boredom is the exact filter that is currently washing out all of my less disciplined competitors.
Wow, that is a phenomenal reframe. The boredom isn't a bug in your career. It is the feature that separates the amateurs from the professionals. It's the crucible.
It is the crucible.
But of course, if you are grinding through that unglamorous middle phase, trying to maintain consistency, you are inevitably going to make mistakes, right?
Well, it's unavoidable.
The junior analyst is eventually going to mess up the finance spreadsheet in a real, highly visible way, and that mistake is going to bring them face to face with a manager who is going to point it out.
And that specific interaction, the moment of receiving critical feedback, is the second major breaking point for the highly talented. How you metabolize that criticism dictates the ultimate ceiling of your entire career.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the source material introduces this concept called the praise paradox.
Yes, the praise paradox.
It argues that talented people are heavily praised so early and so consistently throughout their formative years that they develop a profound psychological vulnerability.
They do.
They literally never learn how to hear criticism without it triggering an existential crisis.
It's the dark side of the gifted kid phenomenon carried into adulthood. Think about the architecture of their identity, right?
Okay.
If your entire sense of self, from elementary school all the way through your early career, has been constructed on the foundation of being the smart one or the natural,
The golden child.
then any piece of negative feedback doesn't just feel like a comment on your work. It feels like an attack on your core identity.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
So if a manager sits our junior analyst down and says, this financial model has major structural flaws and the logic in your forecasting is broken.
A resilient person just hears the feedback.
Exactly. A resilient, process-oriented person hears, the model has flaws. But the deeply talented person, whose ego is entirely fused with their intellect, they hear, you are a fraud. You are not actually smart, and everyone is finally figuring it out.
Which triggers an immediate fight or flight response.
Immediately.
And the tragic irony here is that to protect that incredibly fragile glass ego, they begin to actively avoid the exact situations that would make them better.
They shrink their world.
They stop taking creative risks. They retreat into the safe, narrow scope of things they already know they can do perfectly. They build a fortress out of their early success, which essentially guarantees they will never grow beyond it.
And this is where the research draws a devastatingly clear contrast with the so-called average professional.
Okay, let's look at the average person.
Consider a colleague who never had that natural brilliance. Let's look at someone who struggled with mathematics from the very first day of school.
The kid who had to work for it.
Right. They had to sit in the front row. They had to go to after-school tutoring. They got answers wrong on the whiteboard in front of the whole class. And they had to sit there feeling foolish while a teacher patiently pointed out every single error in their logic.
Getting roasted on a daily basis.
Basically. What happens to the psychology of that person over the course of 10 or 15 years?
Well, they become completely bulletproof to the sting of correction.
Completely bulletproof.
They are intimately familiar with the sensation of struggling. Because they've had to survive a constant stream of corrective feedback just to maintain a baseline level of competence, their feedback tolerance muscle is massively overdeveloped.
Which becomes their absolute superpower in the corporate world.
Right.
When that person enters the workforce and a director completely tears apart their project proposal, they don't spiral into a crisis of identity. Their cheeks don't flush. They don't get defensive.
Deal with it.
They simply pull out a pen and say, okay, show me exactly where it breaks so I can fix it. Because they have zero ego invested in being a natural, they iterate at lightning speed.
They just absorb the hit and keep moving.
They absorb the criticism, apply it, and improve at a vastly steeper rate, eventually completely eclipsing the talented person who's seen it far ahead of them but refused to adapt.
I have to admit, when I first read this part of the source material, I was slightly thrown.
Really? Why is that?
Because our entire educational and corporate system operates on the assumption that having a head start, having that frictionless early advantage is the ultimate goal. I mean, parents spend thousands of dollars trying to ensure their kids never have to struggle.
Oh, absolutely. Tutors, test prep, all of it.
But this text is arguing that struggling early, finding things deeply difficult from the jump, is actually a massive biological and psychological advantage long term.
It feels entirely counterintuitive, I know, but it is deeply anchored in cognitive science. The text points to a very specific psychological mechanism here called desirable difficulty.
Desirable difficulty.
We need to spend some time on this because understanding this mechanism changes everything about how you approach your own career growth.
I mean, the phrase itself sounds like an oxymoron. Why would difficulty ever be desirable?
Because of how the human brain actually encodes long-term knowledge and skill. In cognitive psychology, a desirable difficulty is an environmental stressor or a learning task that requires a considerable, almost frustrating amount of effort.
Okay, so it has to feel hard.
It has to feel hard. But that effort ultimately leads to vastly superior long-term retention and performance. The classic example researchers use is reading a textbook.
Like a college textbook.
Yeah. If you read a textbook that is printed in a beautiful, clear, highly legible font, the information flows into your brain completely smoothly. It feels highly fluent. You close the book and think, I totally understand this.
Right, because it was easy to read.
But because your brain didn't have to expend any real metabolic energy to decode the information, the neural pathways built are incredibly shallow. A week later, the information is gone.
So the lack of friction actually prevented the memory from sticking.
Exactly. Now, conversely, if you take that exact same text, but you print it in a slightly degraded, slightly blurry, difficult to read font, the reader will feel incredibly frustrated.
They have to work for it.
They have to slow down. They have to squint. They have to consciously decipher the words. They will tell you they hate the experience. But when you test them a week later, their retention of the material is astronomically higher.
Wow.
The friction, the struggle to process the information, forced the brain to engage deeper cognitive resources, building robust, permanent neural pathways. The struggle cements the knowledge.
It's the exact mechanism of physical hypertrophy and weightlifting.
Oh, that's a great comparison. Walk me through that.
Well, if you walk into a gym, pick up a 2-pound dumbbell, and do 50 bicep curls, it feels completely effortless. You have perfect form. You might even look good doing it, but your muscle undergoes zero change. To actually grow, you have to pick up a weight that is heavy enough to cause actual micro tears in the muscle fiber. You have to push until your form shakes and you feel physical burning.
The burn is the point.
The difficulty is desirable because the biological response to that specific stress is the creation of new, stronger tissue.
That analogy translates perfectly to professional skills. Things that feel incredibly hard, things that make you feel clumsy or inadequate in the moment are the exact mechanisms that build durable professional strength.
So the talented kid is basically just lifting 2-pound weights their whole life.
Precisely. The highly talented person, trapped by the praise paradox, is spending their entire career lifting 2-pound weights. They are terrified of looking clumsy, so they only lift what they know they can lift perfectly. And they receive constant praise for their flawless form.
While the average person is over there sweating and shaking.
Meanwhile, the average person, who is used to the struggle, is staggering under a heavy barbell, looking foolish, failing publicly, but fundamentally expanding their capacity. If you fast forward 10 years, Who is going to be able to carry the heavier load when a real crisis hits the company?
The person who spent a decade failing under the barbell, it's not even a contest.
Not even close.
So bringing this directly to you, the listener, especially if you are in the early stages of your career or maybe stepping into a new highly demanding leadership role, how do you actively operationalize this?
You have to seek it out.
Right. How do you turn devastating feedback into personal growth? You have to aggressively, consciously reframe the physical sensation of criticism.
Yes, pay attention to your body.
Exactly. The next time a client rips apart your pitch or a manager highlights a massive flaw in your work, pay attention to what happens in your body. You're going to feel that spike of cortisol, your chest will tighten, your face will get hot, and your brain will instantly start generating defensive excuses to protect your ego.
It's automatic.
In that exact second, you have to pause and reframe the narrative. Instead of viewing that physical discomfort as an attack on your innate talent, you must label it as a desirable difficulty.
The burn.
That burning sensation in your ego. That is the exact equivalent of the muscle tearing in the gym. It is the literal sensation of your professional capacity expanding.
And taking that a step further, you can't just passively wait for the heavyweights to fall on you.
You had to go find them.
The professionals who truly break out of career stagnation actively hunt for the desirable difficulty. They purposefully solicit brutal feedback.
Oh, that's tough to do.
It is, but they don't ask their boss, did I do a good job? Because that just invites a polite, useless compliment.
Right, the 2-pound weight.
They ask, what is the one major structural flaw in this work that I am completely blind to? And then they sit quietly, suppress the urge to defend themselves, and let the micro tears happen.
So let's look at the picture we've painted so far. Let's assume our junior analyst actually figures this out. They push through the agonizing boredom of the middle part. They build ironclad, consistent habits.
Okay, they survive the middle.
They shatter their own glass ego. They embrace brutal feedback as desirable difficulty, and they are constantly iterating and refining their skills. They are now producing truly phenomenal, high-level work.
Sounds like a dream employee.
Right. So if they do all of that, are they finally guaranteed to break out of their career stagnation? Does the universe finally reward them?
In a perfect theoretical vacuum.
Yes.
In the actual reality of the modern corporate landscape. Absolutely not.
Wait, really?
Really. Because if you are doing all of that incredible transformative work in a corner when nobody is watching, none of it actually matters to your career progression.
Ah, okay.
And this brings us to the third and most highly contested pillar from the source material, positioning.
Positioning, the concept that makes every purist and introvert listening right now want to just throw their phone across the room.
I know.
I feel the collective resistance to this idea because it attacks a very sacred belief. We want to believe that the work speaks for itself.
We all want to believe that.
If you put your head down, block out the office politics, produce brilliant, consistent, highly refined work, and you are objectively the best in your department, the belief is that people will inevitably notice. The cream has to rise to the top. It's treated like a law of physics in business.
It is, but the source text anticipates that exact resistance, and it dismantles it with zero apologies.
Yeah.
The author states that the idea that the work speaks for itself is arguably the single most comforting lie in the professional world.
A comforting lie. That is brutal.
It is brutal, but it is necessary to hear. We cling to that lie because we want the world to be a pure, objective meritocracy of output. It absolves us of having to play the game.
Right, it lets us off the hook.
But work, no matter how brilliant, no matter how flawlessly executed, is fundamentally inanimate. A spreadsheet does not have vocal cords. A line of code cannot tap a vice president on the shoulder and explain its own elegance. Someone has to actually notice the work, interpret its value in the context of the business, and champion it to the people who control the resources.
And the reality of the environment we are operating in is that decision makers are completely overwhelmed. They are drowning in a relentless fire hose of data, emails, crises, and competing priorities.
Exactly. The modern executive does not have the time, the bandwidth, or the inclination to put on a headlamp, proactively go spelunking into the dark, quiet corners of the office and hunt for the hidden genius who is quietly doing brilliant work in secret.
They just don't have the time.
They don't. If you're not actively making your work visible, you do not exist in the organizational consciousness. Therefore, succeeding requires a completely different, highly active skill set that exists entirely outside of your core talent. We are talking about the skill of visibility.
Self-promotion. Strategic networking, aligning your output with the highly visible goals of the company rather than just what you find technically interesting.
Yes. And navigating this is incredibly complex for talented people, usually due to a combination of two psychological barriers, arrogance and naivete.
Let's break those down because they manifest differently, but they lead to the exact same stagnation.
Let's do it.
On the arrogant side, talented people often view the act of positioning as beneath them. Because they are purists, they look down on networking. They view self-promotion as slimy or inherently political.
Like it's a dirty word.
Right. They look at the people who do advocate for themselves and write them off as hacks who are just playing a game because they lack true, raw talent. The talented purist sits back with their arms crossed and says, I shouldn't have to brag. My raw output is vastly superior to theirs, and if management can't see that, it's management's failure, not mine.
Which is a brilliant way to protect your ego while completely sabotaging your upward mobility.
Exactly.
The other barrier, naivete, is perhaps even more common. Many talented, hardworking people simply do not understand the mechanics of how complex organizations function.
They just don't get the machine.
Right. They operate under the delusion that their immediate, direct manager is universally omniscient, and that this manager will perfectly translate and broadcast their daily value to the upper echelons of the executive team.
Which almost never happens.
It never happens.
Yeah.
They fail to realize that in a highly matrixed, chaotic system, visibility itself is a distinct form of value. If your work isn't seen by the people allocating budgets and promotions, your work functionally didn't happen. It is not just about being exceptionally good, it's about being exceptionally good in a location that actually matters to the business.
Being good somewhere that matters. I want to build an analogy around this because I think it makes the abstraction incredibly tangible.
I love a good analogy. Go for it.
Okay, imagine you have a chef who possesses generational Michelin star level talent. Their palate is flawless, their technique is revolutionary, but because they are a purist who believes the food should speak for itself, they decide to open their restaurant in a windowless basement.
A windowless basement. Okay.
Yeah, at the end of a dead-end, uncaved road 30 miles outside of the city.
Naturally.
And they refuse to put up a single billboard or run a single advertisement because they find marketing distasteful. What happens to this generational talent?
Well, they go bankrupt in 6 months. They will be cooking the most exquisite meals in the world for an empty room.
Exactly. Meanwhile, consider a chef who is perfectly average. They aren't a genius. They just make a really solid, reliable smash burger.
Nothing wrong with a good smash burger.
Right. But this chef understands positioning. They buy a bright red food truck. They secure permits to park it at the absolute busiest, highest foot traffic intersection in the financial district right at noon. They install a massive neon sign.
Oh, they're going to crush it.
They are going to have a line around the block every single day. They will build an empire not because their raw culinary talent was superior, but because their positioning was flawless.
That analogy perfectly captures the tragedy of the unseen genius. The chef in the basement is stagnating, but it has absolutely nothing to do with a lack of skill, a lack of consistency, or an inability to take feedback.
They've got all that.
Right? They failed because of a catastrophic refusal to engage in positioning. You have to force your work into the intersection. You have to actively map out who the key stakeholders are in your organization and build authentic relationships with them.
You have to get out of the basement.
You have to volunteer for the messy, cross-functional projects that pull you out of your silo and put you in front of different department heads. You have to learn how to translate the technical brilliance of your work into the specific business language that executives care about, like revenue generated or hours saved.
So synthesizing everything we've pulled from this source material, we've moved from the neurological dopamine traps of early success through the agonizing friction of the boring middle part into the psychology of feedback tolerance, and finally into the harsh, undeniable realities of workplace visibility.
It's a lot to take in.
It is a lot. The question for you, the listener, is what do you actually do with all of this on Monday morning? How do we take these theoretical models and turn them into intensely practical action?
Well, the author of the text provides a very specific mechanism for this. If you are listening to this and you feel that specific, painful tension, the tension of knowing you have high potential, knowing you possess the raw talent, but feeling completely stuck in the mud in your current role, you have to conduct a ruthless career audit.
The text refers to this as the scarily useful question.
It's scary because it strips away all of your external rationalizations.
No more excuses.
Exactly. It removes your ability to blame your boss, the economy, or the company culture. You have to stand in front of the mirror, strip your ego down to the studs, and ask yourself, which of these 3 pillars am I actively failing at?
Let's walk through what that internal audit actually sounds like. You have to ask yourself, am I inconsistent?
That's the first one.
And you have to answer honestly. Do I only perform at a genius level when a project is brand new, shiny, and highly visible? When the novelty wears off and the task requires tedious, unglamorous execution, do I start dropping the ball? Am I currently failing to survive the boring middle part because my brain is throwing a tantrum over a lack of dopamine?
Right. Or you ask yourself the second question, do I aggressively avoid feedback?
The glass ego check.
Look at your immediate circle of peers and mentors. Have you subconsciously surrounded yourself exclusively with people who validate your brilliance? When a client or a manager points out a flaw in your logic, is your immediate visceral reaction to get defensive, generate excuses, or question the intelligence of the person giving the feedback?
Oh, that's a tough pill to swallow.
It is. Are you actively running away from the desirable difficulty that is required to forge your raw talent into mastery?
Or finally, the third question, am I a Michelin star chef cooking in a windowless basement?
The positioning check.
Am I producing objectively brilliant work, but stubbornly refusing to advocate for myself? Am I sitting at my desk, quietly resenting my peers who get promoted, waiting for a magical fairy godmother of management to descend from the C-suite and discover my hidden genius?
The fairy godmother is not coming.
Is not coming. Am I refusing to put my food truck in the busy intersection because I think networking is beneath me?
In almost every case of career stagnation among high-potential individuals, the structural failure can be traced back to one of those 3 pillars. And quite frequently, as the research notes, it is a combination of 2.
Oh, a double whammy.
Highly talented people notoriously struggle with both consistency and positioning simultaneously because their early life taught them that their raw intellect should automatically exempt them from both the unglamorous grind and the requirement to self-promote.
As brutal as that audit might feel to conduct, I actually want to highlight a deeply optimistic reality that emerges from this entire framework.
Please do. We need some optimism here.
We have spent the last hour dissecting the hidden pitfalls and traps of being naturally gifted. But there is a massively hopeful through line here. Unlike your innate raw talent, which is largely determined by the genetic lottery and early childhood environment, meaning you either have it or you don't, consistency, feedback tolerance, and positioning are completely different animals.
They are 100% learnable, acquirable skills. That is the entire crux of the argument.
Yes.
You cannot necessarily read a book and teach yourself to have the innate spatial reasoning of a grandmaster chess player or the baseline vocal range of an opera singer. That is the raw iron ore, you are dealt, the hand you are dealt.
Right.
But consistency, that is not a genetic trait. It is a mechanical habit you can construct through discipline. Handling negative feedback.
Yeah.
That is an emotional regulation protocol that you can practice and strengthen, just like a muscle. Positioning yourself strategically in a company. That is a framework you can study, map out, and execute. None of these 3 pillars require a mystical innate gift.
They don't require genius. They just require a level of conscious, sustained effort that the vast majority of people are completely unwilling to put in.
Which means, mathematically, if you are willing to endure the discomfort required to build those 3 pillars, your competitive advantage in the marketplace becomes absolutely astronomical. You combine the raw ore with the industrial forge.
Before we wrap up, there is a specific metaphor buried near the end of the source text that I want to heavily unpack because I think it completely inverts how society views human potential.
Oh, the ceiling metaphor.
Yes. Normally, when we talk about someone having a lot of talent, we use talent as a synonym for their absolute limit. We view talent as the ceiling of their potential.
Right.
The assumption is if you are born with high talent, your ceiling is a penthouse. If you're born with low talent, your ceiling is the 2nd floor. Your genetics dictate how high you can go. But this text argues the exact opposite. It demands that we stop viewing talent as the ceiling and start viewing it strictly as the floor.
It is a stunning architectural reframing of a career. If you think of your entire professional life as the construction of a building, your innate talent is simply the foundation.
It's just the concrete.
It is the concrete slab you pour on day one. It represents the bare minimum starting point. Now, if you are blessed with an immense amount of raw talent, you get to start building on the 3rd floor instead of the basement. That is a fantastic, undeniable advantage.
Take a great head start.
But it is still just a floor. The ceiling, the ultimate height and structural integrity of the skyscraper you are trying to build, is dictated entirely by the materials you truck in after the foundation is set. And those building materials are your capacity for consistency, your resilience to desirable difficulty, and your strategic positioning.
If you spend your whole life obsessing over how great your natural foundation is, but you never truck in the materials to build the walls, you just end up standing alone on a really nice, completely empty concrete slab, wondering why you are getting rained on while everyone else is working inside.
And that imagery leads perfectly to the ultimate takeaway quote from the lead researcher in the text. It's a line that completely encapsulates the entire philosophy we've discussed. And it's something every ambitious person should probably write on a Post-it note and stick to their monitor.
Let's hear it.
Talent gets you in the room. Everything else determines whether you stay in it.
That is heavy. Talent gets you in the room. Everything else determines whether you stay in it. That perfectly synthesizes the entire journey we've taken today. Let's make sure this is absolutely locked in for you before you go back to your day. If you are terrified of career stagnation, you have to stop relying on the raw ore of your early potential. You have to actively forge it through these three distinct mechanisms. First, you have to override your brain's demand for constant dopamine, embrace the friction, and build relentless consistency, knowing that the work that actually separates the amateurs from the masters happens entirely within the unglamorous, boring middle part.
Second, you must actively rewire your biological and psychological response to criticism. You have to abandon the warm, safe comfort of the praise paradox and purposefully seek out desirable difficulty, utilizing the painful sting of harsh feedback as the heavy weights required to tear and rebuild your professional muscle.
And finally, you have to ruthlessly abandon the comforting lie that your brilliant work will somehow speak for itself. You have to take full, unapologetic ownership of your professional visibility. You have to move your operations out of the windowless basement, embrace the discomfort of self-promotion, and position your food truck directly in the chaotic intersections where decision makers and opportunities actually collide.
I completely agree. And as we close this out, there's one final lingering question. I want to leave you with something to really chew on during your commute or your next quiet moment.
Okay, what is it?
It's a thought that builds on the architecture of everything we've just discussed, but pushes the paradigm into entirely new territory. We have firmly established that talent is what initially gets you into the room, and that mastering these three pillars, consistency, feedback tolerance, and positioning, is what dictates whether you can stay in that room and become an indispensable master of that space. But what happens when you have successfully done all of that? You look around and you realize the room itself is rapidly shrinking.
Oh, wow. You mean realizing that the environment itself is the limitation, like mastering your role inside an industry that is actively being rendered obsolete by technology, or becoming the most vital player in a company with a deeply toxic, dying culture.
Precisely. What happens when you are objectively the most consistent, the most resilient, and the most strategically well-positioned person in a room that is no longer serving your ultimate trajectory?
That is a scary thought.
The ultimate test of professional agility is recognizing when it is time to stop using your hard-won skills to desperately maintain your status in a collapsing room. How do you know when to walk away from the penthouse you just built and use those exact same three pillars to break out, walk down the street, and start pouring a brand new foundation on the ground floor of an entirely different building?
That is a staggering question, and it really is the final boss level of career management. The exact same tools you forged to secure your place in the room are the identical tools you must eventually use to tear down the walls when the room can no longer hold you. I know I'm going to be unpacking the mechanics of the boring middle part and the implications of the shrinking room for a very long time. Thank you so much for joining the conversation on this deep dive. Keep ruthlessly auditing your foundation, actively hunt for that desirable difficulty, and as always, stay curious.
That's it for today's episode of Whyloric. If this made you rethink what's actually holding you back, hit subscribe and let us know in the comments. Which of the three do you think you struggle with most? Until next time, stay curious. This has been Whyloric.